Hi, everybody. I'm Amy,
And I'm Audrea.
and this is The Right Crowd. So grab a cup of coffee,
Or a cup of tea.
maybe a little something on the rocks, and let's get started. All righty. So we are wrapping up our discussion of seven-figure fiction by Theodora Taylor. And it's all about putting universal fantasy into your books to make them more tasty.
I love the way you said that. More tasty. Yes.
You want to make them more appealing to more people, so you add all the butter.
Because butter makes it better. I should have brought up, I have that in my pantry. It's a constant reminder, butter makes everything better. A little placard. But anyway, yes, that's what part 3 is about. So in part 1, you learn about Theodora and how she used T. Taylor, how she used butter or universal fantasy to make her books better and to sell more books to become a seven-figure author. In part 2, we learned like what is a seven or a universal fantasy, and we saw all those examples that we talked about in the last episode. So if you didn't watch the last episode, shame on you. Go watch it. And
you might want to watch it, 1 and 2, so you know what in the heckingers we are talking about in number 3.
That's right. And make sure to buy the book too. All right. Yes. So in part 3, we are getting down and dirty. Not literally, of course, but with applying universal.
Not on this channel.
No, but with applying universal fantasy to your own whip or work in progress. And there are exercises throughout the book, but in this third part, she walks through how to apply universal fantasy, not just to your book, but also to your ads, your blurbs, to make people do the clicking. And we talked a little bit about that. And just on that first page, starting with chapter 11, I have a little note there that this is a great exercise. She says to clear your mind of expectations and cynicism and pay attention to the parts that spark something inside you. And she's using this as she's using this on her Viking wolf description. And she says, don't pay attention to the fact that you would never read a redheaded Viking wolf book, but you can apply that to any of the blurbs. When you're scrolling through Amazon or the ones for books of your favorite books that you really like, think about why it appeals to you. And the other part is pay special attention to anything that makes you imagine yourself in the same situation. And that's a clue that universal fantasy is at play in that blurb or that ad copy. So that's just on the first page of part 3, how to apply this. And then she gives you a great example of her own book. Like I'm going to read part of that. When Chloe Adams was 4, her shiftless, that's easy for you to say, shiftless shifter parents abandoned her on the side of the road. Oh, she got abandoned. I mean, so that to me, I'm like, oh, then what happened? And then, but now she's reinvented herself. So this is, from rags to riches. Yep. She saved herself as a DIY domestic goddess, universal fantasy slay all day. And she's engaged to the hottest alpha in Colorado. I'm going to stop there, but that's all these universal fantasies smack dab in this book. The hottest guy, the billionaire guy or whatever picks you. So that is at play here. And then, but then she goes on more about this is where the Viking time traveler shifter comes in. I don't know, but based on the description and all because she makes me want to read it. And she has a warning. This smoking hot romance contains jaw-dropping twists and turns and sizzling sex scenes and nothing less than the adventure of a lifetime. Oh, I want an adventure of a lifetime. So anyway, so throughout section or part 3 are great examples applied to real books and how you can apply them to your books. And I actually did that for my work in progress or my book, Blue Christmas. And because what I really like about this book is it's great if you're just starting writing. It's great if you've been writing a long time to see how you can apply this to your blurbs or your ad copy, or reinvigorate your writing. But it's also good for those of you who are editing to make sure you are including universal fantasy in your books so that they sell better or you sell more of them. So that's what I did when we started reading this book, is I went through this and said, where do I have any universal fantasy? Did I completely miss the mark? And what was funny to me is I had some universal fantasies in my book that I did not even realize were universal fantasies, but they were things that appeal to me. Like I have an orphan who finds or makes a family. That's a universal family, the create a family or found family. I have the opposite of going from your provincial life, or I have someone who's going from the city, she's coming from Chicago, and then she's landing in this really small Midwestern town in South Dakota that's completely out of her wheelhouse, that she doesn't, and it's a town filled with, well, Elvis impersonators of all things. But so it's in
South Dakota?
In South Dakota, did you know? South Dakota is filled with Elvis impersonators. Well, it is in my fiction. So it's one of my universal fantasies. No. So that's one of the exercises I did, is to figure out how this, how I'm either using universal fantasy already and play it up in my, so there's more of it. It's more, it's yummier, or to add more universal fantasy to my work in progress. And another part of the, I did, oh, I don't, so what part of part 3 did appeal to you, or do you want to chat about? Amy.
Okay.
I don't want to.
And I'm okay with just sitting here, because I mean, I a lot of times feel like I do all the talking. So I'm like, you just keep on talking. I think the thing that stuck out the most for me in part 3 is she says to write the book description before you write the book.
Yes.
And then, which I've never thought about, but then she goes through step by step. Here's how to do that. And here's how to see if your book is going to have all the pieces. And I think what's interesting is that I think that kind of goes with Craig Martell, who does 20 books to 50K, the conference that we've done a video on, we've talked about. He said he did something before the conference where it's called Drive Across America.
Oh, yeah.
He lives in Alaska, and he was going to a conference in Tampa. And so he hit cities along the way. He drove, and he hit cities along the way to meet up with people that were part of the 20 books to 50K group, tribe, whatever you want to call it. And one of the things, and he came to Jacksonville, and I went to the dinner. And one of the things that he said that I'd never heard anyone say, but I think kind of goes with this, is that he doesn't write his book until the cover art is done.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to see what the artist comes up with based on his description. And then he writes the book based on the cover art. I think this is kind of around the same thing. What would I want my book description to be for what I want to write, and then go write that story.
Yeah.
I think it kind of goes hand in hand. So she gives you the steps, but she also says to check out someone's YouTube channel, which Michelle Schusterman's Fast Outlining Method on YouTube. So I looked up that young lady, and she does have a YouTube channel. So I subscribed. I haven't watched any of them yet, but I have subscribed, like you're going to do with our channel. You're going to subscribe, you're going to like, and you'll tell all the peoples about it. But yeah, so I think that's what I got the most out of this part, is that she says to write the blurb first, and then gives you this step-by-step how to do it.
Yep. And in this,
and
that is all. But I you know what I really love about this book is, I mean, she tells you what it is, then she gives you examples of what universal fantasy is. That's a lot of part 2. and how you can find it in your real life and everything that you watch. And then part 3 is all about how to apply it. So you've got outlining for the when is part of this one. And like you said, add or AD before you write, writing your blurb or your ad copy before you write the book, and making sure you get your universal fantasy in at the beginning. Or as I'm doing, I've already written the book and I'm in the revision mode. So I'm making sure that I beef up or butter up, make my with more universal fantasy, put the ghee in. And then rules for writing your better seller. She's got that in here. One of the things that I outlined or highlighted is if you're stuck, this is another exercise you can do. If you're stuck watching or reading a true dud, like some movie you're in that you like or watching that you didn't like, use my favorite thing to do in that situation, mind edit the property. What kind of universal fantasy would have made this premise and characters more enjoyable for the audience? So to do that, like, I mean, don't just waste that experience, or, I mean, if you can't get up and walk out because, or switch the channel, figure out what would make it better, which is a great exercise for becoming a better writer and applying that stuff to your work. Oh gosh. And then, so the other thing she does in here is about, she goes over character goals and how some characters, like she talks about Olivia from Scandal and Phantom and some other characters, how to make your characters more irresistible. And she also talks about some of the books we have on our shelf. I love she gives some references and some other nonfiction or authorcraft books that will help you to do things. Like we said at the beginning, this is not how to write a three-act structure, and this is not how to write the better characters, but she refers you to some things like Lisa Cron's Story Genius, which is a book that I have on my list, and another YouTuber, Abby Emmons, who, oh my gosh, I love Abby Emmons. Shout out to Abby Emmons, another YouTuber. She also has, she has some great things about how to write 3-act structure, some great tutorial videos. So that is a lot of what's in part 3. And like I said, I took part 3 and I started doing the work to apply it to my own work in progress to see where I have universal fantasy apply, how it applies and how I'm applying it. And so I wrote one of the exercises on page 117 in this book, which is part 3, 117. Early in part 3 is she has a before and after of ad copy. So I did that for mine. This is what I wrote. Maxa is awkward and odd. So how did she wind up married to the town's hunkiest hero? So that's what she's got. I mean, she in my book, a lot of the people in town, she's from Chicago and she's coming to South Dakota, are wondering how the hunkiest hero in town, you know, he's a football star and hot and all these things. How did he wind up with this awkward woman from Chicago? So she's a fish out of water. That's another universal fantasy that applies. And I wrote, she's not the only one wondering. Unfortunately, she's too busy trying to find a killer before a hunky husband goes to jail. So I have some more work on that, but that's the first draft of that exercise for my own personal work in progress. So we recommend that you go through this book and apply a lot of the exercises to your own work in progress. After that exercise, let me get to the next one that I have highlighted, is to make your own universal fantasy list. So you guys heard us talk about some of that in episode 2, where Amy talked about Bosch, about the quest for justice, or that, you know, like everyone matters or no one matters. Love that from Bosch. That's a universal fantasy for me, is that justice will prevail. And that's a lot of why I like cozy mysteries, because that's what happens in them. So you're supposed to make your own universal fantasy list. That's on page 153. And then you can start sticking that into your own book or making sure it's in there, because if you like it, there are probably other readers who like it. And then she talks about why this book, or who this book is for. And she also talks about that in the beginning of the book. So this book, just like she recommends, this book is great for the newbie author just starting out. So how to start writing with universal fantasy applied. It's for the person who's got a few books under their belt. She calls that person the gambler and wants to try rolling the dice. If you still feel like you're rolling the dice every time you upload a book, then if you apply universal fantasy, then it's no longer a gamble. It's just about almost guaranteeing that your books will sell. It's for the person who goes to the blank page and doesn't know where to start. You can do, like Amy said, use the exercise of writing the blurb or the ad copy first, and then writing your book from there. And it's for the person who's written lots of books and then wants to invigorate their writing. So that's who this book is for. Any type of writer, from beginning to grizzled or experienced author with lots of books. And I've mentioned before that I belong to, or that I go on Clubhouse, the app. And one of my favorite rooms on Clubhouse, or one of my favorite clubs, is the author conference. And a lot of the authors in there are 6-figure, 7-figure authors or newbie authors. And they all rave about this book, Theodora Taylor, or T. Taylor's book, and how they've, she spoke at an RWA conference, so Romance Writers of America. She's spoken there, and she speaks at other conferences and teaches this. And someone who heard her speak at a conference said, OMG, you need to write a book, because my people are asking me to share my notes from the conference. So you please write it all down. And that's why she wrote it. And you can see it's not, like we've said, it's not a big book, but it's a good book. It's a useful book. Real authors love the book and love applying or using it to apply universal fantasy to their own writing and to their own ad copy. So from marketing to writing, this book is going to be helpful for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. The only other thing I want to point out is chapter 16 is rules for writing your better seller. And one thing that I hadn't really thought about, but I was like, yeah, is she says every scene or every chapter, every scene should be bestie or Instagram worthy.
Ooh, yeah.
So like, if you're writing a scene and it's not something to write home about, why are you writing the scene?
Yep.
So, and don't, unless it has a point, don't slodge people through taking a shower and brushing your teeth.
Exactly.
Like, is there a point? Like, is there a reason that you're taking us through that? Because somewhere down the line, that's going to be important. Fabulous. If it's not, why are you wasting space? You're going to get readers who put your book down because there's too much wasted space.
Exactly so. And yeah, I wish I had found this book. Well, she didn't write it until this year, but if I had found this book years ago, or when I started this work in progress, this one has been through several iterations, but I would have started out writing like that. And so I wouldn't have to go back and edit to put the stuff in there. I would have been writing from the start, with writing each scene to be juicy or yummy or have lots of butter. And they say that, I mean, that's not a new concept, but the way she's put it is actionable. And that's one of the reasons I like this book. It's short. I mean, we talked about that. It's bite-sized, it's actionable, and it's practical. One of the things, to your point, that people have said about writing is, if you're bored writing it, the reader's going to be bored reading it and probably stop reading it because they're bored. So don't write boring scenes. So this is Theodora Taylor, or T. Taylor, tells you how not to write. I'm trying to get a better angle. How not to write boring scenes. So yeah, great stuff in this book. So I highly recommend it, and it's going to be one of my reference books for what's going on the show.
Yep. I'm glad I got the real copy, the physical copy of it. So anything else you want to say about that one?
It's really good. Nothing else though. So nothing else from me about the 7-figure author.
Cool. So that's going to be it for this discussion. Be sure to check out the next book. We're gonna do Anatomy of Story next. We said in the beginning that we just want to make sure that we gave it its due. So that will be the next book that we discuss. And let us know in the comments what you think and how you feel about universal fantasy and butter. And yeah, like and subscribe. Follow us on all the things.
All right. Bye.
Bye.